Thank you so much for the time. When you're playing historical figures and you're talking about a certain period of time, how important is it for you as actors to educate the audience as opposed to simply entertaining them?
I think it's really important that the two are sort of seamless, because you don't want to patronize an audience by telling them a bunch of stuff. You want to involve them in a human story that has a heartbeat and with recognizable people doing things that are relatable. So I think it has to be a kind of fluid interaction between both things. I think the astonishing things that aren't in the history books there are in the history books, but you have to delve quite deep to find out the detail of them that we kind of examine in this. It's helped to do that. It's became a very personal struggle between two sort of titans of the new electric industry. And I don't know, I think if you are laying on the facts too heavy and it's not dramatized, it feels like a lesson, and it's kind of a turn-off for an audience. It certainly is when I'm in an audience watching a film like that. So, there's so much that's entertaining about this anyway, in the fact that by playing it out in the scenes that we had to tell the stories of their relationships, of their inventions, of the era, of the business, of the transport, of the light, everything that colours this story with its humanity, it kind of takes care of itself. You can't look into this story and not realise more about the personalities at the same time as what they're doing, which was so extraordinary. So hopefully you'll be entertained as you kind of learn.
It's interesting you mentioned, though, the personal intricacies and the personalities of the figures that you portray. How difficult was it to portray those personalities on camera?
I had a hard time at points, I guess, with the idea that Edison was quite such an asshole, because I'm an Englishman playing an American icon who's known as the greatest inventor of all time, the largest number of patents anyway ever filed in this country and possibly the world, I don't know, but definitely US. And I thought, it's quite hallowed ground to be critical of, but there it is. And I guess that was a challenge for me. But it's not a case of good guy, bad guy, villain, goody. It's not quite that polarized and black and white. It's a little bit more subtle, and I hope it's a bit more subtle and nuanced than that in the end result. You have to understand and empathize in some way, like or love the character you play, I think, to really enjoy doing it. So you kind of fight for their corners. I had to give up on that sometimes. Just play the bad. But yeah.
It's billed obviously as kind of like this Edison versus Westinghouse type thing. Where does Tesla fit into this?
Oh, wow. He's like the roving super agent, But a lot of people, they don't even know it, It's amazing how many people let him just slip through their fingers when they could have, Benedict's been saying that it'd be fascinating if all these people just agreed to get along and cooperate, and how much more perhaps they could have accomplished. And they accomplished a staggering amount, but it really is funny to see how Tesla was treated during this time. I mean, now he's considered, probably of the three of them, I would say probably the most fascinating.
Definitely. I mean, if these guys were sort of thinking 10 years in advance, he was the one who was thinking 100 years in advance. I mean, he was a true visionary.
Yeah, he didn't even need the wires.
Yes, exactly. He was onto wireless before. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible what he achieved, or what he imagined.
And what a character too, so eccentric. I had no idea, the way he dressed, he died penniless, I think, didn't he, in a hotel room. And it's so interesting to me that we never hear any of that, because he was so undervalued and unappreciated in his time.
I think it's powerful that Musk has done this thing with the Tesla patents of putting it out there so that we can advance the proliferation of the electric vehicle after such a sort of suppression of it from the petrochemical industry for so many years, which is scandalous in itself. And that's another example, like, well, can't we all be in this together? You could have made a shit ton of cash if you'd invested in renewables before now and solved a lot of problems which we're now facing. And I guess it's another beat in history that we're examining with this story of what could have been. And that, for me, is the tragedy of that end scene between the two of them, is if only Edison had dropped his guard and not built the fence that is used in that metaphor in that scene to describe how he felt abused. He put the fence up, someone else benefited from it, and you know, Westinghouse's beautiful comeback is, but why need a fence at all? Why not just share the land, you know? We're all in this together. Ultimately, you can't take it with you when you go. All those profound, cliched T-shirt truths are truths. And, yeah, we could really, please God, learn something about that from that era now.
What could have been history repeating itself? Whenever, doesn't matter if it's, you know, back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, or the 60s. I feel like those are the two things that you always get when you watch stuff like this, or when you revisit stuff like this. Alfonso, when your friends ask you what it took to get this film to what is now a theatrical release, what do you tell them?
That every movie is worth fighting for and dying over. You know, it's that anything you take on, it could be a breeze and it could be a joy, or it could be a nightmare. But I really believe in the film. I never forgot why I wanted to make it, and that's the one that's the reason I kept fighting and kept pushing to get my version out. And so and if they're talking to me and supporting me still, I have nothing but love and appreciation. I owe so many people. So I'm so grateful to so many people.
When you're doing a movie where you have historical events, historical figures, how important is it for you as a director to not only entertain the audience but educate them?
It's a fine line. If you do too much education, it sounds like homework. It doesn't feel like a movie anymore. And that was something that we kept playing with throughout production and in post. How much do you explain? How much do you trust an audience? How much do they want to really know, or how much information do you give them before it starts getting in the way of the drama? As long as there isn't confusion and there's enough to latch on to, that's just something you want to calibrate in editorial, because ultimately you want to be entertained and you want to have an emotional experience and you want to see maybe parts of yourself reflected in these men.
What did you find interesting about the personalities of some of these characters, or these figures?
What I found interesting in them, they would be lost without the women in their lives. Edison needed Mary Edison to, at least in our version, in my interpretation of Edison in this film, to center him, and she was his moral compass, and without him he will drift into the dark side. And I loved, which is based in history, the relationship between George and Marguerite and their beautiful love affair. They never went a day without speaking on the phone if he was out of town. The way he treated her as an equal, and the way she was perceived, and the way she was treated by everyone at WAPCO. Also, I think that's what I thought was quite beautiful about finding their human side, you know?
And I know it's obviously Edison versus Westinghouse, but where does Tesla fit into this?
Well, Tesla literally is the missing motor between both men, and he is the one that's seen 100 years into the future and seeing how to improve on. He acknowledges and he knows clearly that Westinghouse has a better system, yet he has some problems of his own. And Edison knows, and Tesla knows what that is, and he tried to communicate that to Edison earlier in the film, but Edison again won't listen because he's a very stable genius, I guess. but he won't listen because it's not his idea. So he is the missing link between the two that really takes us into the future.